Are you a South African musician trying to figure out how much musicians earn in South Africa? Welcome to this episode where I plan on demystifying just that. Music in Africa recently released a report stating more or less how much musicians earn in South Africa from being active. So I plan on sharing some notes and topics on this report. I will leave a link in the description and in the comments below so you can read through this report. So basically when they made this report, they came up with 5 categories where musicians typically earn. The very first one is live performance revenues. This is typically money that is earned from live performances and fees related to that. The very next one is services revenues. These are revenues that are generated from providing services. Typical services are session fees, producer fees, and related fees from services. The very next category is from grants and funding. Typically, these are funds received from NGOs or other organizations as grants or funding for musicians. The very next revenue stream is brand related revenue streams. This is typically from merchandising or from leveraging your brand to earn some form of revenue, so from brand sponsorships, etc. The very last one is revenue streams generated from music rights, so music rights revenues, and these are revenue streams from leveraging your IP, your intellectual property, copyright, and these typically come from SAMRO, Capasso, and a lot of the revenue streams that I focus on a lot in my content. Based on these 5 categories of revenue streams, they did a survey where they detail how many people they studied and for X amount of time, and they were able to establish that on average musicians in South Africa for the stated period were earning about 9,890 rand per month. Cumulatively, they break it down in percentages where they show you more or less how much musicians are earning on a cumulative level. What I found of particular interest from this report is that on a cumulative percentage basis, a lot of that money is coming from grants and funding, which is highlighting that a lot of the money is dependent on grants and funding, so musicians are struggling to generate their own kind of funding to fund their music career. On a month-to-month basis, it was about 38% of that money comes from grants and funding, which is almost 40%, which highlights that musicians really need to focus on ways of generating consistent funding and how to go about making their money. They go into detail on each of the funding revenue streams and they give a little more detail where musicians are earning their money. But what I wanted to focus a lot on is that there's a heavy emphasis on live performances, whereas a little emphasis on IP and music rights in order to get your money in. What I think is something I highlight a lot in my YouTube content is that live performances is money that you get now, today, and maybe you'll get paid once again later in the future. But in terms of music IP, whenever your song is being used, you keep on generating, and it is more a passive side of the music hustle. So it's very important that for your day-to-day you focus on your live performances, but you leverage on the intellectual property and the music rights side of things, because once your fame dwindles, which is more or less inevitable in this kind of career, it is the music IP side and the music rights that will keep on paying you for the rest of your life if you earn that. Another thing that I'd like to highlight, the reason record labels stay afloat longer than the artists they sign is because record labels typically own the music rights and the IP side of things, and whereas the performers and the music artists get the live performance. So they get their money for today, but in the future they don't have the money, and it's the other way around for record labels, and that's why they are around for a lot longer. I'd like to highlight that I have left a link in the description for the full report. There's a lot of detail there. It's only 18 pages, so it's not so deep, but it's something that I think if you are trying to get your foot into the music industry, that you should actually spend some time to see where more or less the money is flowing and where the money is. If you want to know how many streams you need to make 1,000 rand, watch this video.